Hello, welcome to Also Driven. We were just passing Mulhouse and we remembered there's a museum here. It's the National Auto Museum of France. So let's go have a quick look around a museum I know nothing about. Lovely bit of artwork just as you go in. Those are quite cool. So like most of these museums, they always start off with, here is the earliest bits of motoring that we have, which is obviously 1890s. And they look more like prams and cars. Something I've always noticed with these museums, just because you were first to market with a product doesn't mean that you were actually going to be particularly successful, although there's an exception to every rule. And some of those early adopters have done better than others. The fastest car of 1899 was electric, and it was called the Never Satisfied because the Elon Musk of the day said he could always do better. Oh, something to keep the kids entertained. Record packing of a car while you're on holiday. You can pretend you're going on holiday. I expected it to be basically rows and rows and rows of French cars, but I think probably because of its proximity to Germany, we actually do have quite a few Mercedes and associated brands like Steer. SS, Kim Jaguar, we've got Alfa Romeo. Some of these things are absolutely gorgeous. That's quite the face. Obviously Alfa deciding to be quite challenging. One of Mr. Porsche's early attempts for Mercedes-Benz looks rather familiar looking. You'd nearly think he only knew how to design one type of car. Oh, we've got the toy car section. Always enjoy these. So the top one is a Moskowitz. Then we have a Peugeot 403 Cabriolet, like Columbo used to drive. Obviously an SL, a Simca, and bizarrely, a Renault 16 Cabriolet. It's quite cool. You like that? Quite a strange one. Who knew there would be so many toy cars that you could get for your kids to pedal about in? I can spot Renaults, 2CVs, DS. That looks like some sort of Skoda. I can see a Simca down there, another Peugeot. Dear knows what that is. Oh, just so bizarre that they got so many toy cars. Yeah, they really do like their model cars here. Obviously the posh end of the market. We've got your Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, you've got your Jaguar E-Types, more racing Mercedes. I think that's a Triumph TR6, Citroen DS Cabriolet. Yeah, this would have been my dream as a 6-year-old. Now this is more my thing. So we've got a 1969 Renault 4, which for some reason has been cut up into a microcar. It's a smart car for its day. Well, there you go. That tells you all about it. We have the Trabant, Peugeot 403. So we're into the French stuff now. The 404, the Dolphin, 304. I think that's a Cabriolet with a hardtop on it. These were all massive sellers for the French in the late 60s, early 70s. And then we've got slightly more bunker stuff. A Simca, which I've never seen, some sort of Simca Coupe. Panhard. These things look like spaceships, absolute spaceships, back in the day for 1964. And obviously, it's our first Fiat. Needs no introduction. And you have the DS. Gorgeous looking SM. Hard to believe that's from 1971. Absolutely space age. And these are even weirder. I mean, what are these? These are what, like mid-60s? And they were 10 years ahead in their styling. I mean, you know, even if you took all the chrome off that now, it would probably look relatively much more modern than like 80s. This has really piqued my interest. This is the Prime Minister of France, Citroen C6. So as you can see by the windows, it's armored. Has quite a lot of extra tech inside there to communicate and protect. You got the little extra mirrors on top of the door mirrors, the little flag holders screwed into the front bumpers. blue lights. Yeah, that's quite cool. No idea what it's here with the rest of these like 60s cars, and it has typically French style, no placard or card to say what the story is behind it. Yep, Ferrari, Renault 5, and no idea, and yet again, no card to say, but this is obviously welcome to French madness. If only Reliant made something like that. A bit random, not everything's got a card on it, but massive. I mean, this is just one hall, and some of the stuff is really like qu'est-ce que c'est? Hein? Oh, they like the Ferrari. Not really my thing, but you gotta admit, they are quite pretty. I mean, it's one of the things that you find quite strange. I mean, race cars, 50, 60 years ago actually looked rather gorgeous, whereas now they're just sort of like engineering marvels of aerodynamics, which generally don't seem to look quite as pretty as these things. I actually thought it was closely related to the Batmobile, but no, it's one of these. This is the very last 2CV ever made. It was originally owned by the production manager of the factory in Portugal, and then it went to his son, and he just recently donated it to the museum. So it's one of the most, it has all the options, Texas Charleston version, so you get 2 mirrors, which I'm sure Sean would be horrified about. It has cloth seats with headrests. It's hard to believe like this was still in production in 1990. Absolutely amazing condition. It's only done 10,000 kilometers, which is what, 7,000 miles? Just one little peek inside. Can't really see because of the lights, but yeah, that is so cool. Last ever 2CV. Conveniently, they park it beside one of the earlier 2CVs. That one's from 1954. Cute little thing, and then obviously beside one of the early Renaults. And then we're into Panhard, and then a lot more, how would you put it, the sort of French mainstream saloons back in the 50s. This one's quite bonkers. It's a custom-bodied 2CV, which was made for one of the champagne houses. From the front, you would never know, but when you kind of scroll around to the sides, you can see that the window line and the roof line is very 2CV. Early prototype from Panhard. They were experimenting with cars which would have phenomenal MPG through better aerodynamics. The mad thing about this is the air intake and the headlight is all merged into one. The museum has a lot of custom one-offs. This gives you a little bit of detail on this one. Thankfully, a lot of this stuff is in English. Hopefully that's long enough for you to read that. But yes, I want to make a car, please. Could I have Ford V8? And a bit of Tatra. Always like those. That one's in 1937. So by that point, I think they'd started to lose the big fin on the back. Oh no, I'm talking nonsense. It does. And then we have a little like micro car, which again is quite cool. So this was originally an electric car from during the war in France. It literally looks like something out of the Jetsons. But after the war, they converted it to 2-stroke, so it has a little petrol engine now. I just think it's absolutely bonkers. Some of the later Bugattis, and I love the way they've gathered them together to basically make the French flag. Some of the styling is a little bit more successful than others. That just looks like a car that's sort of got slightly constipated. More selection of classic cars from the big French manufacturers. Renault, Peugeot, and of course Citroën, because you cannot go to a French car museum and not see a traction event. We are in a little section on the Monte Carlo Rally, and that is a million miles away from Sean's 1-litre base model. So have a quick look around. It's all about the original Prince Albert of Monaco and his obsession with travel and adventure, and I got a little video of more recent Monte Carlo events. So all of these cars were owned by the royal family of Monaco. Some of them, I'm not too sure about the styling. Others, well, who doesn't like a Morris Minor? Some interesting little extra lights on the back of that one. That's quite cool. I like that. This is something I've never seen before. It's a Francis Lombardi Fiat 600. His addition to the styling was some rear doors. So it's actually a four-door, so you got some little suicide doors on the back. I quite like that. And you got a Fiat 600 Jolly because, you know, you're in Monaco. What else would you have? Obviously, when you're the prince of the country, you can have like 001 as your number plate. Oh, just noticing that this Lexus has a rather different bit of roof treatment to the average Toyota-based one. That's quite bizarre. Incredibly luxurious, though. Huge motorsport selection here. You could spend hours reading all the little placards. Obviously, being French, Gordini is very popular as a brand, so they've got quite a lot of his racers here. This little Simca Gordini does look like the race car that could, but I'm sure it did. Obviously, if you're into Bugatti, this is the place to come. They have a lot of them. Yep, it keeps going. We're into the 20s now. Yeah, they do like the Bugattis. Ignore the music behind me, they're waffling on about that Bugatti at like £1,000,000-odd. But this little Renault 5 won the Ivory Coast Rally in 1989, and I think that's personally a lot more impressive. Okay, there's a flashy button that says push. Well, that was exciting. Obviously, Stellantis are making quite a display of the fact that they still make cars here at the Mulhouse factory, which are mainly Peugeot branded ones, I believe. Apparently, this is the least expensive Bugatti ever made. It was designed for driving around his factory, but they did sell them and they sold for around 10,000 euros. No, francs. They didn't have euros in those days. I'm just a little confused because I've been traveling. Anyway, it was about 7,000 francs less than the equivalent cheapest Peugeot. So there you go. Story of the day. You have lived and learned. This is one of the things about going to another country's car museums. You kind of end up looking at things going, I have no idea what this is. I assume it's some sort of very famous French band. They have to be French because they've got accordions. I think you really do need to appreciate Bugatti to come here. But they do have other brands. Rolls-Royce is very popular here. They have a couple of the Royales here, one which is much more identifiable from the classics, and one that was bodied by Park Ward in London, so obviously has a much more sort of reserved styling to it. They were absolutely massive cars. Unbelievable that that didn't sell back in the day. Maybe it was just, was it a period where ostentatious behavior was not the done thing? Love the interior. DFDS is nothing on that. Oh yeah, DFDS do ferries. It's DFS I'm thinking of. It's been a long trip. To the more classic bodied one, but that's quite the interior. Poor chauffeur, he got absolutely no protection for that tiny little windscreen. Yeah, that really is something else. Renault had one of the most distinctive front ends of the early days of motoring because it didn't actually use a radiator grille like most cars would have of the time, because they actually fitted their radiators much further back in the bodywork, so the vents were usually just before you got to the skull. Means you can really spot their cars quite easily. Yeah, you really can't half tell that they have the biggest collection of Bugattis in the world. I think they're the brothers who originally found in the museum were a little bit obsessed. The thing that's quite strange is that very few people would remember, I mean, nobody is actually going to remember these cars from the 1920s, but they may remember them from 40s, 50s, but again, you're going to be very, very old. But when the museum opened in 1978, these cars were like 40, 50 years of age. So it's like us looking at Rover P6s and Ford Escorts. You forget how quickly time marches on and how automotive technology has progressed. I mean, these have more in common with horses and carts with their separate chassis than they do with anything from the modern world. Just looking at these Mercedes and Maybachs from the late 1930s is like us looking at S-classes from the late 1990s. Yeah, kind of pickles your head a bit. I always find these Mercedes 600s absolutely fascinating. Mainly because they have panel gaps that most modern cars would absolutely kill for. Not mentioning any names, but Tesla. But I mean, the engineering that went into this was just astronomical. I mean, everything is hydraulic on it, from the windows to the door closing to the boot operation. Absolutely fabulous interior there. If I can get it to focus, there we go. Yeah, that's perfect for cruising the autobahns. Even the little quarter lights are hydraulically operated. The early days of the Chinese car industry, these red flag cars were based on Russian designs, which were equally based on Packard designs. And not quite as luxurious as the 600, but impressive nonetheless. That's a big car. It's a builder on Bugatti 57S. Yes, giant Airfix kit of Bugattis. So like a lot of museums, they've actually started doing driving experiences here. Interesting. Seems to be American themed today, plus the usual supercars. The cafe looks quite nice, but unfortunately we had a huge breakfast this morning, so I'm going to give it a miss. They have a lovely little section here with lots of interactive displays, which you can have a look at some of the engineering marvels of Bugatti. One of the things we just read is that he actually designed all his own bolts and screws, so you couldn't take the car to anybody else but a Bugatti specialist. Well, that was our quick trip to the museum. Didn't actually intend to go, but it was a little bit of a last minute thing. So if you're in the area, it's well worth 15 euros if you're hanging out around some very nice old cars. So off to meet Sean, who's currently in Italy and heading towards France. We've just arrived in France. We now need to go south of Lyon, so catch you in the next one. Bye.